here. All right, now into some not so fun news. Mike Clevenger under investigation by MLB for domestic violence, child abuse allegations that were made public earlier this week via The Athletic. For the timeline of that, I think James Fegan of The Athletic doubled up on that today, and it's still going to be a process in terms of the investigation and even for being placed on administrative leave. So we don't know what that means in terms of will he ever throw for the White Sox? Should he? There's plenty of commentary to be had around that, but I think it's safe for us to assume right now, operating under the assumption that Mike Clevenger is not going to throw a baseball for the White Sox, at least in for the foreseeable future here. And we need to start talking about what now for pitching, because that was your big signing for depth. You let Johnny Cueto walk. Vince Velasquez is signed with the Pirates. What now? That's my question for you guys. What do the White Sox do pitching front?
Well, I think as of right now, you look at Davis Martin is the front runner to take that number 5 spot. Ideally, you would like to see him, start the season in Charlotte, kind of be that 6th man in the rotation there, ready to come up when needed. Kind of seen a couple of things in my brief perusing of Twitter.com over the last few days, kind of thinking and suggesting, maybe a guy like Michael Wacha would make sense. A veteran guy. He's been a serviceable pitcher for the last couple of years. He's nothing great. I mean, at this point, he is a back of the rotation number 5 starter. But at the same time, you keep hearing that this team is tapped out financially. So, the fact of the matter is, will a certain person allow them to take more funds from his family trust fund that will, eventually has to go towards feeding his great grandchildren because we can't afford to have them starve. So can the Sox find a few $1 million for another pitcher? Well, remains to be seen now.
I don't know what you do here. I don't know about you guys. Obviously, Davis Martin, as you mentioned, Steve, is a name to throw into the mix here. I don't know if that exactly makes me feel real comfortable. It
shouldn't.
It doesn't. It doesn't make me feel real comfortable. And I think the big miss here was not bringing back Mr. Johnny Cueto. This rotation is now questionable, especially in that 5th starter spot. You're going to have some sort of injuries, and over the course of the baseball season, what are we going to see here? There's going to need to be somebody that's going to be able to step into the rotation. Last offseason, you had the Vince Velasquez signing, and he came in and ate some innings for you in some certain spots where he looked fairly impressive. I don't see that same level of depth with this rotation now, and that's ultra concerning to me, especially with where we are at in this stated rebuild. It's like we're taking pieces off of the house now, and it's really unfortunate that we have to sit here as White Sox fans and talk about now we need a 5th starter going into this season when we are tapped out financially, when we don't have that kind of depth. We'll see if they go out and grab somebody, but I have no confidence that they will at this point in time. It'll also be interesting to see, does that mean that Michael Kopech is going to need to ramp up and go above what his program would have been this year? What are you going to get from Kopech? Are they going to have to, start to use Reynaldo Lopez in longer relief roles to start to build that back up? This is going to be a whole change in plans for Ethan Katz and the pitching staff. I'm really uncomfortable with where we're at right now, guys. It's sort of scary.
I think Michael Wacha would be a logical fill-in right there. You talk about a guy that's available, should be able to afford him. Obviously, Steve, you had mentioned the factors that are forbidding that, at least at the moment. But there is still some time before pitchers, catchers.
Would you go as far as to say several factors, Jonathan?
Yeah, several factors. Yeah. You can use that terminology, I guess. I mean, they already have themselves, right? That would be my choice, just logical look at it on paper. And, one thing that I think you guys might have talked about in a previous one, but you're eating at it from both ends now with the Clevenger situation, and then with Liam Hendriks too, obviously. Terrible news with him, with his diagnosis there. And we don't know what the future holds for him either. So You talked about Reynaldo Lopez. Yeah, sure. You might think about, you need to go and use him for some more longer term sort of innings situation there, Tony, building that back up. However, he was probably a guy that you're counting on for high leverage based on what he did last year. And then Kendall Graveman sliding back in there as well. That was probably going to make up your punch, I would imagine, along with Aaron Bummer there, right?
Where is Ross Detweiler when you need him?
That's a good question. I don't know where Ross the boss is.
The boss has to be out there somewhere. I mean, we just we got to figure this out. Anytime you can get a good Ross Detweiler mention on a show, it just makes me giggle.
I mean,
we were all
he's
on
a
Ross
logical fit.
Yeah. This show was very heavy on Ross the Boss in 2019.
I mean, we were also high on Mr. Odrisamer Despaigne.
Yeah, well, that changed.
He's overseas now. He's overseas. That it's not going to work for us.
But wasn't that just on Charlotte Knights on Tap?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he still made some appearances on the mainstay show, but yes, he was the X Factor for Char Knights Weekly.
Yeah. Guys, another name that I don't think has been brought up here, Jimmy Lambert, another guy who I don't know if you're talking about starter role there, but we're talking about increased longer sort of, relief role. I think that's a guy that slots in as well that you have to consider. And obviously, I think he had a really solid season last year. By all accounts, showed some excellent improvement. But again, if he gets overused or, overexposed, will that effectiveness go down? That's where my concern lies then, where I'd like to have a guy like Michael Wacha be able to at least eat some of the innings up front there.
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern, Johnny. And I think that's going to be sort of the story that we're going to have to watch early on in this season, because the Hendricks thing really gets to me too here, because everybody's got a slot up one. And now when you lose a starter like this, you start to bring everybody back. So we'll have to see how Grifol manages this bullpen. We've also got a new manager in here who's going to be a lot different than what we saw last year. So the usage from some of these guys could be vastly different than what we saw under the previous regime. So it'll be really interesting to watch how this unfolds, especially once the season starts. We're not going to get the answer in spring training. We're going to be waiting a while to really see how this all shakes out.
One of the other interesting aspects of this situation here, if you look at the decision not to bring back John Cueto, it kind of just makes you wonder now, was this a decision that was largely driven by Ethan Katz, for example? Because you had Cueto here, a guy that is almost universally loved in just about every clubhouse he's ever been in, was a guy that was just a consummate professional when he was out there with his team, went out there, and you could almost count on him to give you 6 innings pretty much every time he would take the ball. So to just willingly kind of walk away from that and make that choice to go in a different direction for a guy that had question marks on the field, first of all, it's just very odd. And it kind of just really points to issues with the decision process of this organization here. You had somebody in-house that you knew what he was all about. You knew what you could get from him potentially. And you said, we're going to take a gamble on somebody else. So what led to that decision process? Obviously, I don't think we're ever really going to get to know the answer to that question, but it's something that just kind of has you leaving you scratching your head a little bit.
Yeah, you bring up Ethan Katz there, and it's interesting because, it's kind of like we had said for years, right? The Coop will fix him. Is there a Katz will fix him sort of mentality at play there? It makes you wonder. And Steve, it sucks because we'll probably never know unless one of us, is able to transform and become a fly on the wall in those the locker room, in those offices. So the thing that eats at me about that is that it was reliable. There may be some higher ceilings with some other guys, right? In terms of, Lucas Giolito should probably be a higher ceiling guy, but in terms of reliability and the what have you done for me lately test, Johnny Cueto checked all the boxes.
Not only did he check all the boxes, Johnny, he was a guy that I had my eye on when these pitching rule changes were in place. He was a quick worker. I think he's going to be one of the guys least affected by the pitch clock. So just a real puzzling decision by the Chicago White Sox to not lock him back up. And I don't know why they couldn't lock him up and make an offseason acquisition to further short things up, especially after watching what took place last year with the rotation and some of the injuries. I think Lucas Giolito is a question mark going into this year, although there was video footage of him throwing 89 miles an hour that we can go back and forth and debate. There's, obviously the health of Lance Lynn that's there. The Michael Kopech, what are you going to get from him in a full season? So a lot of question marks with the rotation right now. It's sort of puzzling to me on so many levels that we've went backwards on paper, at least.
I think
go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
I was going to say just one final thought on Cueto here, and one of the more disheartening things about it was, I don't know if anybody caught his introductory press conference down in Miami, but he went full on Kenny Powers style, draping himself in the Dominican flag. They're walking out from the center field entrance. I mean, that was, dare I say, cinematic.
It was cool, and good for Johnny. I don't. Thing is with the Miami Marlins,
did they put the scoreboard on for him?
Yeah, I think they did. Unlike Andrew Benintendi.
That's part of the ComEd offseason, savings program.
Yeah, granted, it may be a little nitpicking there on our part with the Benintendi thing. Who knows if they added on? The picture just came after, but
you faced some criticism for that tweet that was sent.
I know people said, what did they say? Psychotic levels of desperation to find something to complain about. And my response to that is welcome to twitter.com.